Good morning, everyone. My name is Harmony. My ancestral name is Sitlakis, and I'm from the Tla'amin Nation. And myself and my partner Hannes have been supporting the self-governing Indigenous governments to develop a suite of tools that we are going to be working through today. So a bit of context for this work to start with. Our people, our governments, Indigenous peoples in what's now Canada have developed our own knowledge systems that kept us well, kept us wealthy, kept us healthy in these territories since time immemorial. And those knowledge systems were deeply rooted in our knowledge of the land, in our knowledge of each other, in our worldviews and ways of being and knowing. And that was like the foundation of our governance for generation over generation. And the introduction of colonialism into our worlds intentionally disrupted and undermined our data and our knowledge systems in a whole range of ways. Epistemic racism means that our knowledge systems are often seen as less than or as primitive. We've been shown it's harmful to be counted, or people have been assigned numbers and then our bodies managed on the basis of that number. There's been theft of knowledge from our nations. So many of the pharmaceuticals that we take today are founded in our knowledge systems without any compensation to our people. We get told whether we're healthy or not on measures that we did not create. So metrics are created, reports generated about us, we're counted, we're reported about, often in ways that talk about gaps, that we're deficit, we're in the gap, we're on the wrong end of the gap. Often these narratives about being poor, sick, violent, dependent. Vulnerability is a big one. And then today, often there are also a whole bunch of legal impediments that surround our government's ability to access data about us, our data that we own, and to use it for our own purposes. There's all of this data sequestered in other governments' databases. Often there are all sorts of quality issues with those data. They don't compare with data that we might have in our nation governments. There's not ways in which we can fully access row-level data that we might need to inform our work. So these are all of these issues that have been surrounding our work in data as Indigenous governments. And our people have resisted these harms of colonialism, and we've asserted our rights to own and govern our own data about our own people, about our identities, about our territories. And this group of self-governing Indigenous governments has really been at the forefront of that work in their individual agreements and as coming together as a collective to produce this Indigenous data toolkit. And this is really founded on our rights to own our data, our rights to govern our data, and then taking those rights and giving us practical tools to give expression to those in our day-to-day functions of governance. And that's really what this toolkit is about. So this project started before I joined this work. And in that work, the Indigenous Data Toolkit was developed. What's on the slide now is showing you some of the assets that have been developed and hosted on the indigenousdatatoolkit.ca website since 2021. This includes this spindle whorl graphic with a set of tools, resources, and guidance in kind of the foundations of data governance, in like how do we manage data day to day, and how do we acquire and analyze data. And so there's a set of kind of what we would position as the core foundations of data governance already on that site. And many folks are familiar with the site as it has been running since 2021. And then what we've been asked to do is support the next phase of the work. And this is what I'm going to talk about today. What we've been asked to produce is a series of new tools that are kind of more of that practical on the ground guidance that's really specifically focused on data collection. So How do we collect data as Indigenous governments that reflect our worldviews and that matter to us? So we have this nesting, this is hence the graphic on the slide, nesting set of tools that support that end-to-end process of understanding and articulating what's a framework that represents our worldview. How do we then nest a set of indicators within that framework? And then how do we go about going to collect and report on data then associated with those indicators? So what you see on the slide is a list of the tools that we have developed and are now launching on the site. So we have a capacity assessment. Where's our starting point? Where are we starting today in our overall data capacity? Then how would we go about further developing our data governance as an Indigenous government? So there's a whole tool that unpacks all of the domains of data governance and describes what kind of good enough looks like. Then there's a conceptual well-being framework and an associated facilitation tool. So that well-being framework are the domains that all of our self-governing Indigenous governments that are part of this collective have gotten together to develop this set of domains that is common to their worldviews at a very high level, but also comes with this facilitation tool so that can be adapted to each SGIG's own context, worldview, belief systems. Then there's this companion document that is, how do you go about customizing indicators and developing indicators? What are indicators? Supporting governments through the process of indicator design and selection, and really includes a starting point set of indicators that any government can use that is tied to that well-being domain. And we did more than just a set of indicators. We have described each indicator. What is the associated concept? What is the thing it's actually measuring? What are the mathematical formulas associated with each one? And what are the survey questions that you can go out and design a primary data collection exercise that will provide the data needed to illuminate those indicators? Then there's a whole guide about how do you go about doing data collection? How do you design a survey? How do you design a plan for data collection? Should you do a survey or a census? How do you develop a communication strategy? How do you incentivize people to fill out a survey? All of that is laid out in the data collection and analysis tool. We've also built a dashboard that all of the SGIGs will be able to access if they choose. For when they collect data, they can upload it into this really slick data visualization tool that supports people at their desk to do this work, to access data, to democratize data so that it's not just the realm of data analysts, but it becomes all of our opportunity to use those data at our desk to inform the work that we do for our governments every day. Then there's a work plan and costing guidance tool. And this supports us to kind of understand, okay, if we've done an assessment, and this tells us our starting point, we've got all of these tools that tell me how to kind of get from beginning to end, but how do I create a plan for me in working through that process, and a plan that's like realistic with clear phases and with some considerations to keep in mind with respect to what it might cost us to do that type of work. And then like all of that serves people like me who are very kind of frameworky in my way of thinking. But there are many of us who engage much better and learn much better through story. And so we've consolidated all of the case studies that run throughout the whole site and run throughout all of these tools. And we've pulled them together into a single resource so that folks who prefer to engage through story can read the story of a fictional Salingatuk government and interface with the tools through that method. I just want to honor the work that the group has done on these tools. These are photos of the workshop, one of the workshops that we had in the course of development of these products, where people came together over the space of a couple of days and really did some applied work as a group. It is hard. We're all individual, diverse Indigenous governments with very different worldviews, very different cultures, and very different circumstances. But there is, like, beyond the fact that we have agreements, self-government agreements, there are other things that do bring us together as Indigenous peoples. And that's what this exercise was about, was bringing us around Like, what are our ways of thinking about well-being and community well-being? And so these are photos of some of the work that that all of you have done in developing these tools. So just an example about how all of this comes together. On the left is the domains of well-being that we came up with together. So you can see there's 7 domains. At the heart of this is community well-being. And then around the edges are the things that make us well and that we want to measure and understand how well we're doing. And then there is an 8th domain that is out on the edge, which are the external elements, the things that we know influence our well-being in ways that impede our progress, that continue to oppress and interfere with the expression of our rights. And those are things like racism and colonialism. And so we do want to measure them and understand the degree to which they affect us. So those are all of the domains in the framework. And we'll walk through that framework in a separate webinar, but this is the total picture. And then for each one of these, we've described what is the definition of this domain and what are all of the subconcepts or subdomains within that domain. And so what you can see in the middle then is in leadership and governance, this is a description of what we mean by leadership and governance in the context of this tool. It's about our internal governance and leadership practices. It's about self-determination. It's about our rights. It's about what good governance means to us: transparency, accountability, knowledge. And why do we care? It's because good governance is really supports the cultivation of well-being, equity, thriving in our communities. And then we have a set of indicators then within this domain. In this domain, there are 5 core indicators that we've described: trust in leadership, knowledge of governance, comfort participating in practices of governance in the SGIG or in the community, ability to exercise rights, and equity. And then for each of these, we have a survey question. So in this case, if we took knowledge of governance, there's a survey question that is, I understand the leadership structure under our treaty agreement, our self-government agreement, and I feel like I know what's going on. And you can see the square brackets. This is all the customization guidance that we provide to you so that you're using the right terms, the right words, the right language that resonates in your culture and in your community. So this is just one example, and this is how the tools are intended to kind of nest together. So why do we care about all of this? So what? If you go through this whole process and use the tools beginning to end, the idea is that our governments are equipped with a really high quality, trusted data set that enables us to do the work of governance, make decisions that are based on evidence, understand when something's working really well and say, okay, what's happening there? Let's do more of that. Let's keep doing that. Understand where something is challenging, something's not working. There's a problem. Hey, well, like what's happening with this population? We need to invest more. We need to develop some programs. We need to advocate. We can advocate. We can use this as power collectively as self-governing Indigenous governments or individually to support our negotiations, support our relationships with other local governments and other levels of governments. And this is all on things that matter to us and not those things that are externally determined about us and then reported about us without us. These are the types of questions that you can answer within this process, within the survey. How often are our people out on the land? What are they doing out there? How satisfied are our people with the services that we're running in community for their health and well-being? What are the biggest concerns that our people have about safety in the community? These are the types of questions that the tool helps us. These tools collectively help us work through, report on, celebrate, and hold accountability for results to the people we care about. So with that, I'm going to show you kind of where to find this stuff on the new site. So this will be the new site. So when you are entering into the Self-Governing Indigenous Government site, you will be asked to think about, and this is less for us as the people who have been involved in this work, but it's about other visitors to the property that we've developed collectively as a team through this process, is we want people to be respectful of the work that we've done and to continue to support people to understand our data sovereignty and rights to our data. So there will be entry protocol that people are asked to read and consider before entering the new site. I'm going to accept that protocol. Then on the new page, you will be able to find these tools in two places. One will be down here in the What's in the Toolkit. You can see there's a tab here called Applied Tools. And then up here in the top navigation menu, you'll be able to see all of the tools here as well in this tab. When we click on that tab, it's going to take us to a bit of an introduction of all of the tools, the history that I've just talked to you about, and the work that that's been done to create this suite of tools and why they hang together as a single piece of work. And then you can navigate to each of the tools on the right-hand side here. So that should be everything that you need to get started on this toolkit. And in future webinars, we're going to give an overview of each tool, which you can find in the individual pages in the drop-down menu. Thank you.